before I died. I made one last phone call, but Christopher hung up on me. He was holding another woman, cherishing her like a jewel. That woman already had a pregnant belly, and my mother-in-law was calling her sweetheart over and over, sliding the family heirloom bracelet onto her wrist. Christopher looked at her, his eyes full of tender affection. What a warm and loving scene. Fortunately, their happiness is about to be shattered, because news of my death will soon reach them. Chapter 1. I float in the air, seeing my body curled up in the snowy courtyard, confirming one thing: I am already dead. Maybe it will take a few days for my soul to dissipate. I comfort myself. The phone on the ground flashed a few times. It was Christopher calling back. To be precise, he was returning my call. The phone kept flashing until it shut down due to low temperature protection. Christopher, returning my call now. It's too late. I can no longer answer. Chapter 2. I had planned to die quietly, but at that moment, the snow was falling so gently, and the creaking of the swing sounded so much like when Christopher used to push me high when we were young. I suddenly wanted to say a proper goodbye to him. He doesn't even know I have cancer. But when I called, it was immediately hung up. I paused for a moment and still opened Joanna's social media. Sure enough, she had posted another video, in the villa Christopher bought for her. He and his mother surrounded her, pampering and caring. Caption: help. They're spoiling me into a little fool. I put down the phone, not wanting to see Christopher being affectionate with someone else. A sharp pain surged in my stomach again. I fell to the ground, vomiting blood in large mouthfuls. The pristine snow was instantly stained with a large patch of red. I struggled to get up and sat back on the swing. Honestly, even at death's door, I still find ways to upset myself. Old people, old memories, old places. He now has someone new in his arms. How could he care to look back at things long past? So in the end, I didn't say goodbye to him. Chapter 3. I looked around the small courtyard filled with memories, dilapidated and desolate. Only the cold wind blew straight through. Grandpa and Grandma had long passed away, and Christopher and I had moved out of here ages ago. No one took care of the place, except for the swing I was sitting on. Everything else was broken bricks and tiles, no longer resembling how it looked in our childhood. The scenery isn't what it used to be, and neither are the people. I gave a self-mocking smile. The swing swayed gently in the quiet courtyard. Occasionally there was the sound of snow slipping off the pomegranate tree. I seemed to hear Grandma lovingly call out, "No, Christopher, come and eat the roasted rice cakes." On the stove, the white rice cakes were roasted until they were fragrant, soft, and chewy. Christopher broke off a piece, blowing on it repeatedly to cool it down, dipped it in a small porcelain bowl of sparkling white sugar, and brought it to my lips. Quick. It's best when eaten hot. The rice cake was so delicious that my eyes curved into happy crescents. Seeing me eat happily, Christopher's expectations were fulfilled. He was even happier than if he had eaten it himself. And despite the heat, he went back to break off more rice cake for me. Christopher was so wonderful back then. He loved spoiling me the most. Every time he received snacks or toys sent by his parents, he would bring them to me first, holding the snacks with a proud look. He'd say, "No, give your big brother a smile. If you smile, I'll give this to you." I wouldn't pay him any attention. I knew that whether I smiled or pouted, he'd end up stuffing them into my hands anyway. If someone had told me back then that Christopher would one day protect another woman, allowing her to give me a hard slap, I would probably have scolded you for being crazy. Chapter 4. Christopher's parents were busy with work, and my parents were busy getting divorced, so we both became left behind children, living with Grandpa and Grandma. But because we had each other, we weren't lonely at all. We dealt with the bad kids who called us wild children together, did homework after school together, and napped together over the desk, only to be woken up one by Grandpa. In the winter when I was 10, I had a sudden high fever at night due to chicken pox. It happened that the elders in the village had gone to attend an ancestral ceremony, and only Christopher was at my house keeping me company. Despite the risk of infection, Christopher braved the wind and snow, carrying me on his back to the town hospital in the middle of the night. I was dazed with fever, lying on his back, groaning in discomfort. He kept comforting me. "No, Don't be afraid. We'll be at the hospital soon. Once you take the medicine, you won't feel uncomfortable anymore. At that time, he was only 12 years old. His young back was still thin, but he gritted his teeth and carried me for several kilometers, never loosening his grip on my arms. Surrounded by endless desolate snowfields, I clung to his neck, listening to his voice, feeling incredibly at ease. So please forgive me. Later on, no matter how much he hurt me, I couldn't bring myself to let go and leave. Chapter 5. Several days had passed, and my body was still quietly lying in the snow. I worriedly thought that if someone accidentally saw it, they'd surely be frightened. Sigh. I thought that after death, everything would be over, but I never expected I'd still have to worry about my own aftermath. I decided to find Christopher to see if I could appear in his dreams and tell him about my death. Perhaps after being laid to rest, my soul could finally disappear. I had no choice. I had no one else to turn to. After all, his name is still on the same marriage certificate as mine. It's not too much to trouble Attorney Mood to help collect my body, right? Before leaving, I glanced again at the snowy land. When I was 15, it was here that Christopher confessed to me. On a night of the first snowfall, he knocked on my window, mysteriously saying he had something to show me. Half asleep and wearing pajamas, I had just stepped out when Christopher wrapped me in a warm coat, then carefully led me to the snowy courtyard. In the middle of the courtyard, there was a huge heart shape outlined by footprints, neat and perfect. The snow reflected the moonlight, clear and soft. By then, Christopher had grown into a handsome young man. He blushed, hesitating to speak. It wasn't until I yawned and pretended to go back to sleep that Christopher became anxious and blurted out, "Noelia, I like you." Back then, I was spoiled beyond measure by him. Arrogantly, I raised my chin. "Did you really need to tell me something so trivial?" Christopher was stunned for a few seconds. Then, both annoyed and amused, he came over to tickle me. I laughed uncontrollably, responding to him between giggles. "I like you too, Christopher." I still remember how Christopher looked at that moment. He was happy yet nervous, just holding my hand, his eyes bright, staring at me without blinking, as if he wanted to imprint this moment in his heart. Snowflakes drifted down like fireworks, landing on his fine hair and long eyelashes. In the boy's eyes, there was a gleaming light that held only me. For us at that time, those feelings were already tacitly understood. There was indeed no need to say them out loud. Chapter 6. I floated back to the home Christopher and I shared. I just didn't expect Joanna to be there too. Christopher looked a bit irritable, pacing back and forth in the room. Finally, he stopped on the balcony, lighting a cigarette. In the flickering smoke, his expression was unclear. It was Joanna's first time in our house. She curiously examined the photos on the wall, the coasters on the dining table, and the blanket on the sofa. She took out a round white disc from my fridge, poking it with a grin. "Is this plastic? It's so hard. Why is it in the fridge? So strange." Christopher turned around. "That's rice cake. If you roast it, it'll become soft." Wait. But it was too late. Joanna had already casually tossed it into the trash can. With a thud, I clenched my fists. Had I known that after I died, Joanna would openly enter my house and rummage through my things, I would have burned it all before leaving. Joanna stuck out her tongue apologetically. "Aw." My hand moved too fast. "Christopher, don't be mad at me, okay?" Christopher looked at the rice cake lying in the trash can and was silent for a moment. "Forget it. It's not valuable. When Noelia comes back, she can buy more." Joanna had innocent eyes, and when she acted all coy and sweet, shaking Christopher's arm, it always made people soften. The last time I heard her act spoiled like this, she was still calling him Attorney Moo. Chapter 7. At that time, Christopher was already a partner at a well-known law firm and was still very busy. I hadn't changed my habit of bringing him meals. That day when I brought food, he was in a meeting, so I left the insulated lunchbox and left. As I went out, I realized I had dropped my car keys at the firm, so I went back to get them. I didn't know when their meeting had ended. Outside Christopher's office, I heard a girl complaining in a coquettish tone. "Why is it always these dishes? I'm so tired of them. Can't she change the menu? I suddenly pushed the door open. Christopher and Joanna were sitting at the desk, sharing and criticizing the dinner I had carefully prepared for him. My tone was somewhat stiff. Christopher has been staying up late a lot. These are therapeutic dishes I made especially for him. I didn't prepare a separate portion for Assistant Sue. Sorry about that. Joanna stuck out her tongue, looking pitifully at Christopher. Sorry. Attorney Moo. I won't be picky anymore. Christopher didn't realize anything was wrong and even tapped Joanna's head with a bit of annoyance. Noelia is mature and sensible. She wouldn't fuss over such a small thing. Do you think everyone is as childish as you? Chapter 8. But that's not how it was. In the past, Christopher never wanted me to be sensible. From childhood to adolescence, from the old courtyard to the bustling city, he always said that as long as No was carefree and happy, everything would be fine. He would handle everything. Until I was 17. That year, Christopher's family suddenly faced a crisis. His father jumped from a building due to business failure, and his mother wept daily. Reality abruptly interrupted our romantic and naive youth. Christopher began working multiple jobs, the financial and emotional burdens weighing heavily on him. In the rare times we met, he couldn't hide his fatigue but forced a smile. No, you need to be a good girl now. I won't be by your side, so you have to take care of yourself. I felt so sorry for him and thought it was my turn to be good to him. So, I decided not to let him prepare surprises for me anymore. Not to have him call me in the morning to wake me up. Not to have him travel long distances to celebrate my birthday. Not to let him give so much for me. To help him repay debts. I also took on 2 jobs. I knew he wouldn't accept it. So every month I secretly sent my wages and saved living expenses to his mother, keeping only a little for myself. I lived on steamed buns, vegetables, and free soup, dreaming of braised pork at night. I remember that my job at the milk tea shop ended very late. On the way back, I was followed by someone. I ran all the way back to the dormitory before covering my pounding heart and crying. I didn't even realize I had sprained my ankle and limped alone for months before it healed. I didn't tell him any of this, but Christopher still felt guilty, always apologizing, saying, "Sorry for making No suffer with me." I said, "It's okay, Christopher. Life is long. You can treat me well in the future." Christopher's eyes reddened. He placed my hand over his heart, rubbing it over and over. "Noelia, never leave me, okay? I'll treat you well for the rest of my life. I promise." When he said this, his expression was so serious it bordered on obsession. I had to believe him. How could I not? Chapter 9. He promised me a lifetime. Yet in just 10 years, everything has changed drastically. He gave all the pampering and love he had for me in our youth to another spoiled, cheerful girl. Actually, I should have sensed it earlier. He no longer called me No longer spent time coaxing me. When he praised me for being sensible and understanding, there was actually regret in his eyes. Regret that the innocent and carefree youth had dimmed under the grind of life. Chapter 10. Actually, when Joanna first joined the law firm, when they were still innocent and didn't need to avoid suspicion, Christopher mentioned her to me many times. "A new young girl has joined. She's unbelievably mischievous. I really can't handle her." He said this as if troubled, but there was a smile in his eyes. "Noelia, she really reminds me of you when you were young. I can't bring myself to punish her." Even then, I didn't suspect him, until Joanna crossed the line again and again. When the electricity went out in her rental apartment, she cried and called Christopher. After getting drunk at social events, she clung to Christopher and wouldn't let go, forcing him to take care of her all night. At a celebration party, she boldly smeared cream on Christopher's face and then kissed him, causing colleagues to cheer and tease. Because of her, I argued with Christopher repeatedly. I threatened divorce, demanding that Christopher dismiss Joanna. Christopher rubbed his forehead, his tone annoyed. "Noelia, Joanna is just childish. You used to be so innocent. You should understand her the most. Why can't you tolerate her? If we dismiss a young girl for such reasons, what will she do in the future?" There was deep disappointment in his eyes, as if he didn't recognize me. "Noelia, how did you become so mean?" Chapter 11. With frequent quarrels, Our relationship became increasingly strained. I began to feel depressed, suffering from insomnia night after night. Every time I felt so exhausted that I wanted to leave, the youthful Christopher would appear in my memories. He stood tall in the snow, his palms warm, looking at me with eyes pure and affectionate. Is he still Christopher? How could my Christopher bear to treat me like this? I couldn't leave him, so I began to doubt myself. Am I really being paranoid? Are they really innocent? Should I be more forgiving? But no matter how much we argued, Christopher refused to divorce, and I couldn't make up my mind either. We just tangled like this, until this summer, when I went to the hospital to get my test results. I ran into Christopher as I came out. At the crowded elevator entrance, he had one arm around Joanna's waist, the other protecting her belly, afraid that someone might bump into her. That cautious care pierced my eyes painfully. Across the crowd, holding the stomach cancer diagnosis, clutching my phone that only emitted a busy signal, under the scorching 40-degree sun, no matter how deeply I breathed, my chattering teeth couldn't stop trembling. That was the first time I saw them together with my own eyes. All my self-comfort and hopeful delusions were shattered at that moment. Chapter 12. The moment Christopher saw me, he was filled with panic and shock. I threw away all the understanding and consideration I had shown over the years, slapped the face I had once loved deeply, and tearfully questioned him. Is this the innocence you told me about? Before I could get an answer, Joanna rushed up and gave me a hard slap, leaving me stunned for a few seconds. She used her petite body to aggressively shield Christopher. What right do you have to hit him? When we were young, Christopher and I had many fights. Everyone knew that hitting Christopher didn't matter. But if someone hit me, Christopher would go crazy and fight them desperately. I had never been hit like this before. Wrapped in anger, by the time I came to my senses, I was already disgracefully tussling with Joanna. Surrounded by onlookers, Christopher tried to separate us. In the struggle, Joanna fell to the ground, letting out a painful cry. Christopher instinctively pushed me away, then tightly shielded Joanna behind him. He said anxiously, "Noelia, it's all my fault. But Joanna is pregnant with my child. You might hurt her if you act like this. Please stop, okay?" My heart felt as if it had been pierced by a sharp blade. Because of that incident, I could no longer conceive. I thought it was a shared scar between Christopher and me, a pain we didn't want to mention. Turns out, I was the only one standing still. He had already moved on to a new world. A spasm of pain twisted my stomach. My lips were bleeding, and the taste of blood filled my mouth. I vaguely remembered that when I bit my tongue in the past, Christopher would feel sorry for me for half a day. Around us were onlookers, some whispering, others raising their phones to record. Joanna was tightly protected, while I stood there defenseless, surrounded by cameras and gossip. At least I couldn't cry, I thought. I desperately held back my tears. Don't cry. Don't add another joke. Thank goodness. The hospital security arrived to separate us. They also took me away from the most embarrassing and tragic moment of my life. Chapter 13. That night, Christopher came to find me. I locked the door and refused to let him in, so he sat down outside. Through the door, he kept talking, regardless of whether I responded. "Noelia, the child was an accident. That day I drank too much and mistook Joanna for you. She resembles you so much that I couldn't help but take care of her. But I never intended to betray you. But Joanna is an innocent young girl. She's pregnant with my child. If I don't take responsibility, how will she live? I'm sorry, Noelia. After the child is born, you can hit me or scold me all you want. By then, I'll give Joanna some money and send her abroad. We can consider it as adopting a child, okay? That way, my mom won't pressure you anymore. Noelia, I'll never divorce you. I'll spend my whole life making it up to you. Noelia, please wait for me. Chapter 14. Christopher came to find me every day, and Joanna was no pushover. She would always come along and make a scene. Perhaps the previous conflict had left him apprehensive, fearing we might come to blows again. To ensure the child was born safely, he stopped coming to see me, but he would send long messages every day, painting a picture of our future life. Trying to appease me, I pulled all the curtains, curled up alone in a dark, sunless room, masochistically scrolling through Joanna's social media, watching the loving scenes she deliberately displayed for me. Had leg cramps in the middle of the night. Thankfully, Mr. Moo massaged my legs all night. Finally got the limited edition item I've been longing for. Mr. Moo is amazing. Some people bring misfortune to both the old and the young. Full of bad luck. Yet wonder why men leave them? Hilarious. Christopher was still diligently sending me messages. Noelia, please wait for me. How ridiculous. He seems to think he's just stepping away for a while, and that I will always be waiting for him. Waiting for what? Waiting for the child to be born, or for me to die. Living recklessly like this, ignoring everything. My condition was deteriorating rapidly. I'm afraid I won't make it to the baby's 1-month celebration. Looking back on this life, we had so many beautiful memories. But our last meeting was him protecting another woman and giving me a slap. Chapter 15. I hovered beside Christopher these past few days. I couldn't enter his dreams, but I saw that he was constantly looking for me. He became increasingly uneasy, no longer accompanying Joanna, calling my number every day, hoping to hear me answer. That night, Christopher suddenly woke up in a panic. He murmured, Noelia, Noelia. She must have gone back. Christopher drove overnight, crossing the vast snowy plains, walking the path where he once carried me, and finally, at dawn, arrived at the small courtyard of our old home. The courtyard was already surrounded by people, chattering. How pitiful. Dying here all alone. She was still so young, vomited so much blood. She must have died painfully. She was still holding her phone. Wonder who she was calling. Chapter 16. When Christopher hurriedly squeezed through the crowd, he only saw my body, half buried in the snow. His eyes instantly reddened, desperately trying to pull me out, but he was held back by the onlookers. Hey, what are you doing? We've already called the police. They said to preserve the scene. You can't go over there. Several people held Christopher tightly, preventing him from moving. A few meters away, he stared blankly at me, his voice trembling. No, don't scare me. What have you done? Don't scare me. Stop joking with me. How could you? The word die was stuck in Christopher's throat, unable to come out. No, wake up. I'll push you on the swing. Please get up. Please, get up. I hovered in the air, sadly watching Christopher's desperate cries echo around. Christopher, am I still that important to you? Chapter 17. After the funeral, my soul still lingered. I saw Christopher holding my urn, ignoring everyone's advice, stubbornly wanting to freeze himself here. He kept muttering to himself, No, you were sick. Why didn't you tell me? You must have been in so much pain. I saw those medicines by your bedside. You always hated taking medicine, always needed to be coaxed. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me be with you? He seemed to recall something, painfully grabbing his hair, his voice filled with endless regret. What was I doing at that time? What have I done? Chapter 18. He couldn't immerse himself in grief for long. The tranquility of the courtyard was soon broken. The news of my death was originally just a minor headline, but some online sleuth connected the details with an incident at the hospital months ago, digging up many specifics. The video of Joanna slapping me at the hospital was rapidly shared. Public opinion was in an uproar. The mistress drove the wife to death. Never seen such an arrogant homewrecker. The husband didn't protect his wife when she was hit, only cared about the mistress. Disgusting. Makes my blood boil. Those cheating scumbags deserve the worst. I know those too. They work in the same building as me. The woman always acts all cute. I thought they were a couple. But she's the other woman. Hey, share their info. Good deeds deserve rewards. Joanna was cyberbullied, crying as she came to find Christopher. Christopher, come back with me. Let's clarify this together. The law firm is being harassed. We can't operate anymore. It's your hard work. You can't ignore it. Christopher, Christopher, please stay with me. Christopher didn't even look at her, ignoring her words. Maybe it was too cold in the snow. Joanna didn't persist for long, stomping her feet and leaving in tears. Long after she left, Christopher spoke to my urn. His voice was still so gentle, as if coaxing me. No, I won't be with anyone else. I'll stay with you, okay? If souls could shed tears, mine would have fallen at that moment. Christopher, it would have been so much better if you had said this to me earlier. Chapter 19. When news came that Christopher's mother was in the ICU, he finally raised his unshaven face, as if waking from a dream, and rushed to the hospital. In this world, he had only this one relative left. At the hospital, Joanna, heavily pregnant, was pacing anxiously outside the ward alone. Seeing Christopher, someone usually so proud and willful, managed only a pale smile before collapsing softly. Christopher caught her, anxiously calling for doctors. His mother hadn't woken up yet, and Joanna was about to give birth. 3 lives depended on him. Christopher was busy handling hospitalization procedures, signing consent forms, discussing plans with doctors. Finally, after 2 chaotic days, Joanna successfully gave birth to a son. Both mother and child were safe. His mother also woke up at this time. Christopher finally breathed a sigh of relief. Perhaps he had forgotten. My urn was still kept at the old house. When he left, he had said he would be back soon to accompany me. Chapter 20. The first thing Mrs. Moo did upon waking was to see her little grandson. The newborn slept soundly in his grandmother's arms. Mrs. Moo gratefully held Joanna's hand. Good child, you've worked hard. She then turned to Christopher, her voice old and weak. Christopher. In these days, both I and Joanna walked to death's door. Thanks to Joanna, enduring such pressure and still giving birth to a precious grandson. It was hearing the baby's cries that brought me back. She sighed. Noelia was stubborn and strong-willed, even in death wanting to get back at you. Look at what she's done to you and Joanna. She took Christopher and Joanna's hands, placing them together. Christopher, after going through this ordeal, we should cherish the living even more. You still have your mother, and Joanna, and your son. Look at your son. How adorable he is. Just like you when you were little. The 3 of them all focused their gaze on the baby. The swaddled newborn happened to wake up, opening his eyes for the first time, bright and lively like black grapes. Endearing. Christopher. Look! He's opened his eyes. Joanna excitedly shook Christopher's arm. Before him were his caring mother and his newborn son. He was so tender, so lovely, so in need of care. Beside him was Joanna, her happiness tinged with caution, as if afraid he might push her away. The morning sunlight was fresh, streaming into the ward through the glass window, golden and warm, as if carrying the power of rebirth. Christopher remained silent for a long, long time. Finally, he sighed softly, lowering his hand to caress Joanna's face. You've had a hard time lately. Joanna's eyes instantly reddened. She hugged Christopher tightly, crying as if she had regained something lost. Christopher patted her back, his tone softening. It's all right now. It's all right. Mrs. Moo held her grandson, watching the reconciled couple before her, smiling with relief. In the bright and clean ward, 3 generations together, lovers reunited, a scene of harmony and happiness. All this happened on the 12th day after my death. Chapter 21. I stared blankly at everything unfolding before me. When I gave the money I earned from my part-time jobs to Mrs. Moo, she was moved to tears, saying over and over what a good child I was, how much I had suffered when I broke ties with my parents. Christopher also comforted me like this. It's all right now. No, you have me. Memories from over 20 years flashed by like a carousel. Gentle, happy, anxious, tired, accompanying me, teasing me, spoiling me, loving me deeply, and no longer loving me. They were all Christopher. Ha ha ha. I couldn't stop myself from laughing uncontrollably. So wrong. So very wrong. Turns out, even in death, I hadn't truly awakened. It was only at this moment that I realized that deep down, I still held hope for Christopher. So, I hadn't truly believed that he had completely stopped loving me, even in death. Even in death. Somewhere in my heart, I was still secretly hoping that, after learning of my death, he would be filled with endless regret, hoping that he would feel the same pain I did, hoping that he would sincerely feel guilty toward me. In the end, I was just hoping that he still loved me, even if that bit of love had to be awakened by death. How foolish! I was so foolish. Clearly, all the evidence of his lack of love was right before my eyes. Yet I turned a blind eye, immersing myself in the remnants of a dead relationship, trying to find a trace of attachment from a love that had long decayed, all to comfort myself for the deep feelings I had held in this life. The dark night had ended, and all the gloom and sorrow were left in yesterday. Sunlight generously poured down like a blessing upon everyone. The whole world was filled with vitality and vigor, laughter and joy. Only my pale soul remained hollow and broken under the sunlight. Chapter 22. There should be nothing in this world more ruthless than a lover who has changed heart. After being discharged from the hospital, Christopher quickly registered his marriage with Joanna, giving her and the child a proper status. Regarding the online insults, Christopher calmly issued formal warnings, sent cease and desist letters, and even sued one person as an example. The compensation and apology from that person were publicly displayed for half a month. Christopher was a well-known lawyer in the industry. Handling such matters was second nature to him. The online outrage quickly subsided, but Joanna was not satisfied with her unwillingness to suffer any losses. How could she not retaliate after being cyberbullied because of me? She began writing emotional posts. In her vividly dramatic descriptions, she and Christopher were the true love, and I was the one who clung to Christopher for money. Because I couldn't get pregnant, Mrs. Moo had long wanted Christopher to divorce me and marry Joanna, so she timely appeared in a live stream to testify. My son's ex-wife was a very materialistic person. When they dated in college, she often asked me for money. Very greedy. The previous transfer records were simply photoshopped, swapping the sender and receiver, and displayed. After my son saw her true nature, he didn't like her at all. She used the excuse of being pregnant to force my son to marry her. After marriage, we found out she wasn't pregnant and couldn't get pregnant at all. She sighed in a suggestive tone. They were in a long-distance relationship during college. Who knows what she was up to? So young and already infertile. Nico is a good girl. That day at the hospital, she slapped Noelia to protect Christopher. Yet she was scolded so much, she's been wronged. There were loopholes in their words. Some people noticed, but with Christopher's legal team involved, no one wanted to wade into these muddy waters. Some people, however, believed their claims. Wow, the lady is so cool. The unloved one is the third party. Sometimes, they just met each other a bit too late. So jealous, I wonder when my guy will divorce his wife. Or maybe his wife could just die like Noelia. Ha ha ha. Everything is the best arrangement. They'll be happy forever. People in love will be happy forever. Blessings. Happiness forever. The live stream was flooded with blessings and virtual gifts, and I became the vain, immoral, spiteful, and deservedly dead ex-wife. Chapter 23. After Christopher found out, he was furious and stopped Joanna, but he didn't clear my name. After all, they were a family now, a community of interests. If he cleared my name, wouldn't that openly slap Joanna in the face? The dead are not as important as the living. The online buzz continued to ferment. Many mistresses became Joanna's supporters. They backed her, envied her success, and added fuel to the fire by spreading rumors about me. They even made me into a running joke, photoshopping images to mock me. Hope the wife of my man becomes the next Noelia. Anyone who blocks true love should die like Noelia. Noelia was so sensible. Hope that person can learn from her. In this absurd farce, the clear-headed remained silent while the shameless reveled. I watched coldly as buckets of dirty water were poured over me. A dead person, a speechless dead person. How could I win against the eloquent living? Chapter 24. What I didn't expect was that, at this time, there was still a voice firmly defending me. Noelia was a very good girl. You can't slander her like this. That voice was hoarse and grief-stricken. It was my mother. I looked at her in confusion. She appeared to have aged 10 years since I last saw her. Her thin face carried an expression as resolute as a warrior's. After Grandpa and Grandma passed away, she had come to find me, begging me to live with her, willing to make up for the years she'd missed. I refused to forgive her for her decade-long absence. Besides, I had Christopher then. I thought I didn't need anyone else. Mother held a doll that she had given me when I was little, which I had later returned to her. She wept uncontrollably. From her words of self-blame, I finally understood her difficulties. It turned out that when I was very young, my father had cheated on her. Unable to bear the blow, my mother suffered severe depression, losing control of her emotions, even experiencing auditory and visual hallucinations. She feared she might hurt me, so she sent me away to receive treatment alone. Unexpectedly, when I grew up, I no longer needed her. Even more unexpectedly, I would follow in her footsteps and lose my life. Noelia loved Christopher so much. Whenever she talked about her life with me, every sentence was about him, wholeheartedly. How could she be the kind of person you say she is? That Joanna is the real third party. She destroyed someone else's family and killed my daughter. Chapter 25. Joanna was a bit flustered. She ignored Christopher's warnings and used all her means to deal with my mother. Fearing that public opinion would turn against her, she dug up the fact that my mother was divorced and hadn't contacted me for many years. She didn't contact her daughter for so many years. But now that she's dead, she shows up. Isn't it just because she's old and has no one to support her? Trying to extort money using her daughter's life. No wonder no one wants her. So vicious. The old witch just wants to suck her daughter's blood. My mother, at her age, couldn't fight Joanna and her fans online. She powerlessly defended me, and when she couldn't win online, she held a sign in front of Christopher's law firm, asking him to come out and clear my name. But Joanna cried and pleaded with Christopher, "Christopher, now that crazy woman is attacking me. I can't just not fight back. Can I? How do you expect others to see me? To see our son?" Looking at the young infant, Christopher compromised once again. He wearily came out. Seeing my mother, his eyes somewhat evasive. "Auntie, the online stuff will soon be forgotten. In the meantime, please don't look." Slap. My mother slapped him, her finger pointing at him trembling. "What did Noelia ever do to wrong you? You cheated. She died, and you still throw dirt on her." Christopher hung his head, only saying, "I'm sorry. I'll compensate you financially." Before turning back into the law firm, the security guards held back my mother, her cries echoing at the entrance. "Noelia, Mom is useless. Mom let you down. It's Mom's fault for not teaching you. So you couldn't see people clearly. Couldn't see people clearly. Couldn't see people clearly." I murmured, endless regret welling up in my heart. Chapter 26. I regretted it. I should have realized long ago. If I were important, how could Christopher not notice my pain and suffering for months, letting me die alone? If I weren't important, how much weight would my death carry? How long could it bind Christopher? I did hope he'd feel pain and regret, but that hope should never have been placed on his worthless feelings and conscience. I should have taken action myself, pushing him into hell. As this thought clarified, the youthful figure in my memory gradually blurred, and the ties that had bound me all along vanished without a trace. I shouldn't have died. They were the ones who should die. Just as I came to this realization, a comforting sigh seemed to echo in the void. Blinding white light enveloped me, and my soul gradually dissipated. Chapter 27. Early-stage stomach cancer requires prompt surgery. If the prognosis is good, chemotherapy might not be necessary. Familiar words sounded, and the doctor's face gradually became clear before me. Looking at my surroundings and the medical report in my hand, I realized I had been reborn. Reborn on the day I ran into Christopher and Joanna. My most humiliating day. Everything was still in time. I quickly made a decision. Please schedule the surgery as soon as possible. Use the best plan and medication. I will fully cooperate with the treatment. In my previous life, after learning about my illness, I panicked and helplessly called Christopher first, wanting him to help me make decisions. But now I knew he was accompanying Joanna for her prenatal checkup and had no time for me. Leaving the consultation room, I went straight to the obstetrics department entrance. Sure enough, they were there. Christopher carefully supported Joanna as they came out. The scene that had broken my heart and made me lose control in my previous life now left me calm and unruffled. I took a photo of them and turned to go home. Since I was about to undergo surgery, I needed to rest well. Chapter 28. I sent the photo to Joanna. She thought I was confronting her and provocatively replied, "I'm pregnant with your husband's child, so what if he accompanies me for checkups? It's not my fault you can't have kids." I sent her my stomach cancer diagnosis and added, "I'm dying soon. Christopher is yours now. Take good care of him." Joanna suspiciously sent a question mark. I didn't reply. If heaven wants someone destroyed, it must first make them mad. If I didn't let Joanna become complacent first, how would she dig her own grave? I researched information on stomach cancer surgery. After about 10 minutes, I smoothly opened Joanna's alternate social media account. Just as I expected, Joanna couldn't contain her joy and posted our chat records on her alternate account. Caption: Sisters. I'm about to become official. Below were numerous messages congratulating her. In my previous life, Joanna used this account to write emotional posts flaunting her relationship, slandering me, and gained a bunch of followers, inciting them to smear me together. Many mistresses called Joanna teacher, seeking her advice, and Joanna was happy to guide them. Among them was one named Jasmine, who was special. She was a mistress to some wealthy businessman, eager to get pregnant and become official. In my previous life, she succeeded under Joanna's instigation. Unfortunately, the businessman's wife wasn't as easy to bully as I was. She was formidable and somehow made the girl disappear without a trace. After dealing with Jasmine, she still couldn't vent her anger and kept looking for Jasmine's mastermind. As a fellow wife who was cheated on, I thought I should at least help her find Joanna. Chapter 29. Using the same photo, I sent it to Christopher. He immediately called. I hung up. He kept calling. I turned off my phone. Just like in my previous life, Christopher hurried home to explain. This time, I didn't shut him out directly. He was eager. Noelia, let me explain. It was just an accident. When my mom found out, she threatened to kill herself, insisting on keeping the child Joanna is carrying. The same words as before. He still had Joanna's perfume on him, which made me nauseous. I could have driven him away and cut ties cleanly, but that would be too easy on him. After all, I knew that before long, he would walk out of this marriage and start a new life with Joanna. So I gently placed my hand on my abdomen, showing a look of loss. Christopher, if only our child were still here, would you cherish him like this? One sentence brought back memories. Christopher's expression changed abruptly. He didn't know how to comfort me. His eyes filled with guilt and heartache. Noelia, I thought you didn't like children. Chapter 30. Of course he would think so. At that time, we had just graduated, and Christopher wasn't yet the suit-wearing, renowned law firm partner he is today. As a trainee lawyer, Christopher was overwhelmed daily by heavy and tedious case files. Constant overtime was the norm. Every day after work, I would rush back to cook for him without even taking a bite myself. I'd carry the insulated lunch box and squeeze onto the subway for an hour to bring him food. The accident happened during that time. That day, a man who had lost a lawsuit hid in the law firm, intending to take revenge on Christopher. When that chair came crashing down, I instinctively threw myself over him. The severe pain in my back made everything go black. I heard Christopher frantically shouting for an ambulance. His voice completely changed. I didn't regret taking that blow for him. I just never expected that I was already pregnant at the time. A 2-month pregnancy is very unstable, and that blow caused us to lose our child and made it difficult for me to conceive again. When I woke up, Christopher hadn't slept for 2 days. His eyes and chin were bruised. He stroked my forehead, gently comforting me, repeatedly saying it was okay, as long as Noah was fine. Everything would be okay. That night, I woke up in the hospital room and didn't see Christopher. I walked out a few steps and saw him in the hallway. He had his head and fists pressed hard against the hospital wall, his shoulders shaking as he cried, suppressing his sobs over and over. I'm sorry. No. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I quietly returned to the bed. At that time, I thought that Christopher, who would get anxious for half a day if I cut my finger, who said he would protect me, how could he bear me suffering such harm for him? So for a long time, to ease his guilt, I always pretended not to care, saying I hated children the most. Ha, And he actually believed it. Chapter 31. Actually, Joanna isn't very smart. And Christopher's heart isn't that hard to control. It's just about exploiting his protective instincts, guilt, and adding a bit of fear of loss. After all, Christopher and I have over 10 years of ties. If I really used some tactics, it would be much more effective than Joanna's. It's just that I disdained doing that. I thought feelings should be genuine. Even using a bit of manipulation would taint them. So, in my previous life, I just immersed myself in sadness, pushing myself toward death out of spite. Unfortunately, Christopher didn't deserve such feelings. He only deserved to be used, manipulated by false emotions, played around like a puppet. Chapter 32. I smiled, using a tone of melancholy. How could I not like children? I just didn't want you to feel guilty. Didn't expect you had already forgotten. Only I remember mourning every August 20th. Christopher hadn't realized how much that incident had affected me. Guilt deepened in his eyes. Noelia, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Guilt is a useful thing. Unfortunately, in my previous life, by the time he felt guilty, I was already dead. Once a person dies, overwhelming regret fades with time, diluted and dissipated by family comfort. But now I'm alive. Not only will I not let it fade, but I'll continue to amplify it. It doesn't matter anymore. Christopher, my tone was calm. Today, while you were accompanying Joanna for her prenatal checkup, I was in the adjacent department, diagnosed with stomach cancer. The composure Christopher barely maintained completely shattered. He held me tightly, his voice trembling. No, I'll go with you for another checkup. No matter what, I'll be with you, but I don't want to see you anymore. Christopher, I pushed him away, my tone steady. Let's divorce. Chapter 33. The surgery was scheduled soon, and I was actively preparing. These days, Christopher stayed at my door every day, begging me to give him a chance. He didn't, like in the previous life, ask me to wait for him, then let me endure that painful time alone. After all, with my weeping and heartbroken state before, I was easy to handle, showing no signs of being able to let him go. No wonder he felt assured to let me wait for him for months. It was just heartbreak and pain. After all, how could Noelia really bear to leave Christopher? He probably thought that as long as he turned back, I'd always be waiting for him. Chapter 34. But this time it's different. I was very calm. So calm that it made him panic, especially since he was at his most apologetic. So no matter how cold I was to him, he insisted on staying by my side, explaining, begging for my forgiveness. Noelia, that day we won a big case and went to celebrate. I really drank too much. Joanna's smile looks like yours. I haven't seen you laugh so happily and freely for a long time. So that day, I mistook. I listened expressionlessly, finally unable to bear it. Stop insulting me, Christopher. She looks like me? Did I ever interfere in someone else's relationship? Did I ever get pregnant with an illegitimate child? Would I shamelessly mock another woman for being infertile? I opened Joanna's alternate account, showing him her flaunting of their relationship and her provocative words to me. One by one, Christopher read them one by one, his face growing paler. Finally, he left in a daze. Chapter 35. In the evening, Joanna angrily came to my door. Noelia, what did you do? Is Christopher crazy? He actually wants me to abort the child. Her voice was sharp and grating. I had to step back to keep some distance. I glanced at her, my tone indifferent. An illegitimate child, what right does it have to be born? Joanna was stunned for a second, then flew into a rage and lunged at me. Noelia, you witch! I didn't hold back either. Slap! The slap was loud and crisp. Joanna's face immediately swelled up, with a few scratches. I carefully examined it, quite satisfied. Not bad. Heavier than the slap she gave me in my previous life. Joanna was completely enraged, wanting to continue making a scene, but was firmly dragged away by Christopher, who had arrived later. He didn't look at Joanna's tears and wounds, just stared steadily at me. Noelia, I'm sorry. I won't let her bother you again. I coldly watched as Joanna was dragged away, her eyes filled with disbelief. Perhaps she couldn't understand how. In just a few days, the Christopher who catered to her every whim, the wife she could provoke and bully, suddenly were no longer under her control. She thought she was impressive, that she was charming. In fact, it was just that in the past she used tactics, while I was sincere. But now I've realized, sincerity can't compete with tactics. Then we might as well all treat feelings as an experimental field. Dissect, analyze, weigh, and measure. Who wouldn't learn? Chapter 36. During my surgery, Christopher insisted on accompanying me. I ignored him, letting him bustle around me. Having someone to care for me is naturally good. After all, it's my own body, no need to be stubborn. However, I still hired another caregiver named Ollie, a very enthusiastic young woman. In front of Christopher, I instructed Ollie, in case anything goes wrong during the surgery and the doctors ask for opinions, always tell them to do everything possible to save me. I pointed at Christopher. I'm in the process of divorcing this person. His words don't count. Christopher looked at me incredulously, appearing deeply hurt. Noelia, do you distrust me that much? Do you think I wouldn't do everything in my power to save your life? I sneered. You cheated on me, and you're talking to me about trust? Christopher immediately slumped. Ollie glanced warily at Christopher and nodded solemnly. Don't worry. I will firmly stand up for you. Chapter 37. Christopher took great care with my surgery, arranging for the best doctors to perform it. The operation was very successful. Chemotherapy wouldn't be necessary. With this ticking time bomb defused, I breathed a sigh of relief. During my more than a month in the hospital, I put all my worries aside and focused solely on recuperating. When I fully recovered, I truly felt reborn. At the same time, I received news about Joanna. The landmine I planted for her a month ago finally exploded. Jasmine, relying on her pregnancy, caused a fuss after the wealthy businessman's wife dealt with her. She traced the information back to Joanna, the instigator. It said that on the day they confronted her, Joanna's screams were heard by several surrounding buildings. However, the neighbors all knew what kind of person she was and had witnessed her arrogance. No one helped her, they just called the police. She lost the baby, and her face was disfigured. Mrs. Moo saw the scene and fainted on the spot. She hasn't woken up since. During the time Ollie was taking care of me, she investigated everything thoroughly. When she told me about it, her face was filled with the satisfaction of fulfilled vengeance. I smiled and pinched her cheek. Go buy a cake so we can celebrate. Chapter 38. Christopher still refused to divorce me, so I found his rival, Attorney Martin, to help me file for divorce. Upon hearing that he had a chance to defeat Christopher, Attorney Martin's eyes lit up, full of fighting spirit. If he won this case, his reputation would greatly increase. The evidence of Christopher's infidelity was clear and solid. During this time, because of Joanna's incident, his reputation was in tatters and he was overwhelmed, unable to fully respond. This case was almost a guaranteed win. Seeing the lawsuit, Christopher was silent for a long time. Noelia, do we really have to come to this? I replied nonchalantly. Yes. Why not? In the past, whenever he encountered trouble, I always encouraged him and helped him solve it. Now, not only was I indifferent, but I was also kicking him when he was down. Christopher rubbed his forehead and spoke wearily. No need to make it so complicated. I agree to all these terms. He pleaded. Just, give me another chance, okay? I truly regret it. He was filled with remorse. We grew up together, went through all the important moments in each other's lives. How could I have been so foolish to betray you? Recalling how, after my death in my previous life, Christopher's brief sadness was followed by decisive coldness. I couldn't listen anymore. Christopher, put away your hypocrisy. You disgust me. Who wants his cheap repentance? Chapter 39. Christopher almost left with nothing. The villa and gifts he had once given to Joanna were all liquidated and reclaimed. Now, they are all under my name. I drank the medicinal soup Ollie had prepared for me and looked out the window. The autumn scenery was already desolate. At the twilight of life, it's time to let go. For the first time in many years, I took the initiative to call my mother. The call was answered immediately. On the other end was my mother's joyful voice. We finally reconciled with ourselves and with each other. Chapter 40. Christopher never gave up. He said he wanted to win me back and cherish me properly. One day, while I was taking a walk, he followed me again. I was already used to ignoring his presence. Chatting with my mom on the phone, she mentioned the boyfriend she introduced to me last time, saying he was very interested in me, and asked what I thought. I said he was pretty good, very considerate, and handsome. We could give it a try. After hanging up, I saw Christopher's eyes red. No, you can't be with someone else. Oh, then how did you end up with Joanna? I pointed out to Christopher. Let's be clear, we have nothing to do with each other anymore. Whoever I date or marry in the future has nothing to do with you. Christopher stammered, unable to speak. As we faced off, a speeding car suddenly rushed toward me. Watch out! Christopher quickly pushed me aside and was hit head on himself. Blood filled my entire vision. In the driver's seat, Joanna laughed maniacally, the scars on her face twisting grotesquely. You ruined me. Both of you ruined me. Don't think you'll get away with it. Let's all die together. Joanna was quickly apprehended. When Christopher was taken to the hospital, he was already near death. In his final moments, he held my hand, saying he wanted to tell me a secret. No, on the day I confessed, I deliberately didn't use an umbrella. With his pale, blood-stained face, he managed a sly smile. It was snowing that day. I secretly wished we would grow gray hair together. No, I guess we have grown old together. I interrupted him, saying he should focus on surviving. I didn't want to hear anything else. His smile faded, and he softly replied, okay. Then there was silence. This was the person who once gave me the safest embrace, who had also thoroughly hurt and betrayed me. My heart still ached ever so slightly. Why are people's feelings so fragile, drifting apart halfway, so easily swayed? Must one lose something to know how to cherish it? Chapter 41. As the year drew to a close, with cold winds and swirling snow, I returned once again to the empty courtyard. In my previous life, I died in this winter, across a lifetime's tragic mess. This snowy land remained as pure and immaculate as ever. I quietly watched for a while. Snow fell heavily from the sky. Like a grand funeral, it buried the footprints of that boy from 10 years ago. Completely and cleanly, buried the initial flutter of the heart and the most sincere love. As if there had never been a youthful heartbeat here. As if there had never been a girl who once wholeheartedly gave her heart to him, believing that it would be, for a lifetime.